a national champion from BYU. His name is Trevor Matich, and he joins us on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Trevor, how are we doing on this Monday?
I am doing great on this Monday. Thank you.
Excellent. It's always good to come off a win. We've only had this conversation 4 times. This is the 4th, so here we go. BYU wins. BYU wins the game. 4-9 to end the regular season, a 30-20 win at Hawaii. What did you think of the Cougars' performance at Aloha Stadium?
Loved it. They fought hard in a game that they could have just checked out. I mean, 3 wins, 4 wins, whatever. Won't change a whole lot in the greater scheme of things, but to care about it as much as they did, to care about sending the seniors out on a winning note, that matters. It matters when you care like that because that sets a foundation for the offseason.
Trevor, what were some of your greatest memories when you played against Hawaii?
Well, mostly, Brian, it was about how they almost beat us. It's tough to play out there the national championship year. They were a dropped pass in the end zone away from knocking us off and wrecking that perfect season. And in that game also, Kyle Morrell had the greatest individual football play I have ever seen still to this day, where they were on the goal line. They were, if they'd have punched it in there, they might have won the game as well. Morrell's safety timed the snap. He jumped over the top of the line, ended up inverted so his feet were in the air. And while he was literally upside down traveling back towards the offensive side of the ball, he grabbed the quarterback by the back of the jersey and dragged him down. And that was one of the key plays that made them kick a field goal instead of a touchdown on that drive, and that helped us win the game. But the combination of the athleticism of that play and the timing of that play in terms of what it meant for the season and what it would have meant had he not made it, that to me is the greatest football play I've ever seen. Now, I will add this, too, though, that outside of that, there's all kinds of reasons why playing in Hawaii is just a different experience. We would always have young freshmen that would go to the beach and, they'd leave the snows of Provo and think that they're out there in the sun for 20 minutes and they don't feel like they're sunburned, so they stay for another hour. And then they end up totally toasted, and it's excruciatingly painful to put on their pads and everything else, and the veterans over there just laughing at them. And then there's other things. I mean, I called a couple of Hawaii Bowls for ESPN, and Wisconsin was out there one year. And Barry Alvarez, their coach at the time, told me that he had about a third of his team go to the beach, and they waded out into the water about, belly deep in the water. And the lifeguards were yelling and screaming at them to get out of the water, and they didn't want to. They're football players. They can do anything they want, right? Football players are invincible. Yep. Well, they finally coaxed them out of the water only to find out that day there was a particularly dangerous riptide going on out there, and literally a third of the Wisconsin team could have been swept off the Diamond Head. So that's just one of the things that happens when you go play Hawaii that don't happen anywhere else.
I heard a fun story from Blaine Fowler about the Kyle Morrell play. He said that one of the nose tackles or defensive linemen didn't know that Kyle Morrell had jumped over the line. And so he said, "Guys, we did it! Yeah!" And he was kind of celebrating by himself and then looked over and everyone was looking at Kyle Morrell. And he's like, "What just happened?" And so in film, he was like, "Oh, I see."
Oh, that's what.
Yeah. Oh, so it wasn't me. Oh, rat. That's really funny. That's hilarious.
Trevor Matich is on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline on BYU Sports Nation. Now we turn our attention to the offseason a little bit. And I don't know if you feel the same way, Trevor, but Brian and I have been discussing, we feel like a burden has been lifted. This season is over. It wasn't what BYU wanted. It stunk. There were injuries. There were ineptitude. There was a lot going on. Now BYU can look forward to fixing some of the issues. So our Twitter question today is this. What is your offseason to-do list for BYU football?
Well, first, recuperate. This has been an incredibly taxing season emotionally on these guys, and I hope they get some time off. I mean, take care of their bodies. Don't let their strength and conditioning fall off the map. But I think they need some time off just to get their minds away from football, and I hope they get a chance to do that. So that's job number one. Just kind of take a fire hose to everything football in you and on you, and just clear it out. And then start over again. Now, then when they get going, the physical side of the game wasn't their problem. The mental side, I think, was a bigger problem. And, if I were just to say one thing, I would say that the quarterbacks and receivers especially need to study defense in this off season right now. Get right. I mean, once they kind of clear their mind, take a little bit of time off, study defense, because in order to excel with this kind of a system, you need to understand what the defense is doing and why. Once you know that, you'll be able to make good decisions to take advantage of them. I didn't see that enough from quarterbacks this year, and there are reasons why. It's not all their fault, not always. But once they get that understanding of defenses, what you'll see is a complete turnabout, a 180-degree switch in the effectiveness of the quarterback position at BYU. Because when you know that, and you have the tools to apply that Ty Detmer gives you in his game plans with this style of offense, you have ways to attack a defense, even one that's athletically superior to you, in ways that a typical run-pass option quarterback and zone read scheme can't begin to attack.
Trevor, one of my off-season items on my list was recruiting. And I said specifically going the JC route, but where do you think that BYU should emphasize their recruiting efforts in terms of position?
Well, in terms of position, you could point to some areas of need. They need a difference maker at running back. They need health at running back as well, but they need a difference maker. It really hurt to not have Jamal Williams. This quality candidate was hurt at times. There were other guys that were in there that were hurt. They were in and out. And it's tough to get any continuity and any playmaking. They really miss that. And then speed, obviously. You want to recruit as much speed as you can get. But ultimately for BYU, where they know they can recruit well, really as well as almost anybody in the nation, certainly at a top 25 level, is big guys on the offensive and defensive lines, and quarterback, and tight ends, and linebackers, right? And so, they've already got guys in some of those positions. Especially offensive line looks pretty strong coming back. But you want to make sure that you've got great depth in the road graders on the O-line, because that gives you competition in practice, and that's what really makes you excel on the field. Same way on the D-line. It's hard to find big guys who can run. But you can get, one or two big guys who can run, and then other big guys who can just be like a fire hydrant in there, just make a pile, behind them, and have depth on the D-line that you can rotate in, which BYU really needs to have, and injuries really hurt their depth this last year. So depth on that D-line. In other words, the positions that are not particularly exciting to think about and look at are the ones that will really be the foundation of your success. And think of the University of Utah. That's what they do. Utah emphasizes offensive line, defensive line, and cover corner. They allocate actually extra scholarships to corner. And that is something that BYU can do as well. And so, it's hard to pick one position that they need, but the overall foundation of any football team is offensive line, defensive line, and cover corner. And as long as you're solid there, you can make the rest work. Now, having said that, if I am a running back, if I'm a high school running back that's got some good size and good speed, and I have a lot of choices where I could go, BYU is a place that I would consider very highly. Because their offensive line coming back, even though they lose 3 senior starters, they've got a lot of good quality depth coming up into that offensive line. I think they'll be very good on the O-line next year. And knowing that there's a need for that kind of a running back, if I'm that guy in high school or junior college, I am making a real clear, I'm giving BYU an opportunity to get me in there, because you want to play early, especially at running back. You don't want to sit around for 4 or 5 years. You want to play early and get out of there. And BYU is a place right now at this point in its football history that it creates an opportunity for a great running back.
ESPN's Trevor Matich is on BYU Sports Nation. I want to ask you about injuries before we talk playoff picture here. BYU has emphasized squatting and lower body lifting. And the result was that BYU probably was stronger, and that's a good thing. One of the side effects, though, may have been, I don't know the correlation, a bunch of injuries, like to the tune of 37. And the last time the BYU had this amount of injuries, they had Jay Omer, who emphasized squatting as well, and in 2014, BYU had a bunch of injuries. Is there a correlation between excessive amount of lower body strength and conditioning and potentially injuries, or is it just a fluke?
There can be a correlation, but just because, or excuse me, a causation. But just because there's a correlation doesn't mean that it is a causation.
Sure.
I mean, on its face, the concept of, gee, you're stronger and more explosive in your lower body. Of course, you're more likely to get hurt. You know, that doesn't make much sense. But what you can do is overdo things and then be fatigued entering games. I'm not saying that happened to BYU, but I'm saying that that's the only thing that could happen in that scenario, because typically stronger helps you to avoid injuries. I mean, people ask all the time why football players do neck exercises. Well, it's not because you move people with your neck. It's so that you don't injure your neck. That's what it's for. The reason you do exercises with your hands and your wrists, it's important to have strong hands and wrists in football, but even more than that, you want to avoid injuries. So you want your fingers to be strong. You want your wrists and hands to be strong because they're less likely to be injured that way. And that's really a lot of what strength and conditioning programs do. And you don't have to, during the season, just maintain your strength and conditioning. You can improve it. It's possible, but you've got to walk a fine line there. And the technology that's available now and the knowledge base that's available over the course of college football coast to coast is such that I would be very surprised if anybody anywhere overdid it to the point to where it caused injuries. There are just times when you're a team that doesn't have enough depth and you're facing an all-timer of a schedule, especially early in the season, that guys get worn down and then they stay worn down. And I think that might be a bigger factor than anything for the injuries that BYU had.
Yeah, last year BYU had this, new Tafisi and didn't have the same amount of injuries. So to some degree, maybe it's just a fluke. I don't know. I had to ask. All right, let's finish with this. Who's in your top 4 right now in college football and who's just out?
Well, my top 4 right now is Clemson, Auburn, Oklahoma, Wisconsin. And just out is Alabama. I have them at number 5.
It is going to be a fun weekend. Do you think there's a shakeup again, or will those 4 get in? And Alabama is rooting for Wisconsin and Oklahoma to lose, I think, right?
Yeah, for Alabama, it's best if Stanford beats USC with 3 losses, but 3-loss Pac-12 champs, so Alabama would get in over them. Then you've got the potential for 2-loss champs in the Big 12 with TCU, and in the Big 10 with an Ohio State team that's just not looking all that great. And that's Alabama's best shot. The problem for Alabama is that in not beating Auburn, they missed their greatest opportunity to beat the highest-ranked team in the regular season that they will have faced. So what that means is that they've got LSU and Mississippi State, which will be lingering somewhere around 20 in there somewhere probably, and those are their highest quality wins. And so the committee will start to look at that compared to the fact that they didn't win their own conference and those other teams did. And so Alabama right now is in a tough position just because they cannot be a conference champion and they don't have the quality win. Remember this, that when Ohio State got in over Penn State last year, which I don't think should have happened, but it did, Ohio State did not win the Big Ten, Penn State did. But Ohio State, in their favor, ended up with, I think, 3 victories over teams that finished in the committee's top 10 rankings. And Alabama doesn't have anything like that to give them a boost, so they need massive chaos.
Chaos is the name of the game at the end of the season, college football. Trevor, insightful as always. We appreciate the time, brother.
Thanks, guys.